Hey, welcome. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on a piece of tech that's surrounded by a ton of mystery and, let's be honest, a lot of misunderstanding. Tor, otherwise known as the Onion Router.
So, let me ask you a quick question. When you hear the name Tor browser, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? For a whole lot of people, the answer is immediate: the dark web. It's this powerful association, right? Often linked with all sorts of shadowy stuff online.
And look, while it's true that some people use Tor to hide illegal activities, that is so far from the complete picture. The real story of Tor is actually much more surprising and, honestly, way more important.
So here's what we're going to break down. We'll start with what's really behind the myth. Then we'll get into exactly how this onion routing thing works. After that, we'll explore its role in the crypto world. And finally, we'll tackle some common myths versus the reality of Tor's anonymity.
All right, let's start by digging into where Tor even came from, because this is where that whole dark web narrative just completely starts to fall apart. Get ready for this, because this is where the popular idea of Tor gets totally turned on its head. Tor wasn't created by some rogue hackers in a dark basement. It was actually developed by the US Navy. Yeah, you heard that right. It was a tool to protect their own sensitive government communications online. And that original purpose of security? It's still a huge deal today. Tor is an absolutely vital lifeline for journalists reporting from dangerous places, activists fighting repressive regimes, and even just everyday citizens who want to protect their privacy from constant surveillance. So how in the world does Tor pull off this level of privacy? Well, the clue is right there in the name: the Onion Router. It all comes down to this really clever process that works, well, just like an onion. At its heart is a technology called onion routing, and the concept is just brilliant in its simplicity. It takes your data, whatever you're sending, and wraps it in several layers of encryption, just like the layers of an onion. This makes it incredibly hard for anyone to see what's really at the center. Okay, so here's how it plays out, step by step. First, your data gets wrapped up in all those encryption layers. Then it gets bounced through a totally random path of volunteer computers all over the world called relays. At each stop on this journey, one layer of encryption gets peeled away, which reveals the location of the next stop. And here's the key: no single relay knows the full path from start to finish. Finally, your data pops out of the network from what's called an exit node and heads to its final destination. So the website you visit, it only sees the IP address of that last computer, keeping your own location a complete secret. Now, this powerful kind of anonymity has found a perfect home in a very modern world that also cares a lot about privacy, the world of cryptocurrency. You know, a lot of people think crypto transactions are totally anonymous, but they're usually what we call pseudonymous. They can often be traced back to a real person through their IP address. And that's where Tor comes in. It provides that network-level privacy by hiding your location. This works perfectly with the on-chain privacy of coins like Monero. So by connecting their crypto wallet through Tor, users make it almost impossible for anyone to link their real-world IP address to their transactions. And this just goes to show you that Tor is always evolving. To defend itself from massive denial of service attacks that could basically flood and shut down the network, Tor recently rolled out its very own version of a proof-of-work system, a concept it borrowed directly from the crypto world. But, and this is a big but, it's used in a totally different way. See, Bitcoin uses proof-of-work as a consensus mechanism to validate transactions and secure the entire blockchain. Tor, on the other hand, uses it as a dynamic defense shield. When the network is getting hammered with traffic, it asks new connections to solve a tiny little puzzle. Real users' computers can solve it in a snap, but it makes it super expensive and difficult for bots to launch a huge attack. It's a clever way to prioritize real people. All right, this all sounds great in theory, right? But it brings us to the big questions. What about in practice? Just how anonymous are you really when you're using Tor? Let's just get the most common question out of the way right now. Is it illegal just to use the Tor browser? The answer is a clear and simple no. Absolutely not. Tor is just a tool, like any other web browser. Anonymity itself is not a crime. Now, what you do with that anonymity, that's what determines if something is legal or illegal.
Okay, but what about the authorities? If they really wanted to, could they find you?
Well, this is where things get a little more complicated. It is extremely difficult, but it's not impossible.
Highly sophisticated agencies can monitor the traffic leaving those exit nodes we talked about. And if you're not being careful, say you're logging into personal accounts or visiting unencrypted websites, they could, over time, potentially connect the dots. So no, it's not some kind of magic invisibility cloak.
And finally, let's get to the one complaint anyone who's ever tried Tor has. Why is it so painfully slow? The answer really starts with this one number. Around 6,000. That's roughly the number of volunteer computers, or relays, that make up the entire global Tor network. Think about that. That pretty small network of about 6,000 volunteers has to handle all the internet traffic for over 1 million people every single day. On top of that, your data is being intentionally bounced all over the planet. So that combination, high demand, limited servers, and those built-in security hops, it's exactly why it's slow. It's the price you pay for privacy. So let's wrap this all up. Tor didn't start in the shadows. It was a tool built by the US Navy for secure communications. It uses that clever onion routing method to hide who you are, making it a vital and totally legal tool for activists, journalists, and regular folks who just value their privacy. But it's important to remember that while its anonymity is powerful, it isn't perfect. And that slow speed, well, that's the direct trade-off you make for the security it gives you. And that leaves us with one final, really crucial question to think about. In our digital world, where so much of our life happens online, where do we draw the line? Is the kind of powerful privacy that Tor offers a fundamental right that everyone should have, or does it create an unavoidable risk to public safety? It's a tough one, and something worth considering. Thanks for joining me on this one.